I'm not necessarily proud of what I do. I just happen to be really good at it. And I earn a lot of money. There's nothing stereotypical about my job. I kill people for a living. That's the bare truth of it. But I'm no psychotic or psychopath. I'm very much sane. Well, as sane as anyone who does this job is. I'm a contract killer. So for my own, protection, let's just call me John Stone. There's nothing remarkable, really, about how I came to be doing what I do. You might think that it's the typical broken home, left with no choice scenario, but that's not it. I came from a comfortable upper-middle-class family in Florida. I attended university there, and I even graduated with honors. It was while in college that I discovered my very special talent. There was a gun range a few of the guys liked to go to. I tagged along a few times, and although hesitant at first, it soon became clear that I was a natural. I was a dead shot. And so my nickname from that day on was Deadshot. Then came that fateful day when I really found my calling. A couple of the guys had organized a trip to a hunting reserve located in South Georgia. They catered for deer, hog, and even turkey hunts. 4 of us headed out. A guide joined my friends. Josh loaned me a .243 Winchester, which he said was a good rifle for beginners. About 2 hours into the hunt, I was starting to get a bit flustered, bored out of my mind really, when our guide held his fist up. Military style, I thought. He urged all of us to crouch low. I heard a rustle in the bushes off to our right, but straining to see anything. And suddenly, they came into view. A decent-sized buck, leading 2 small deer, all 3 nibbling nervously at the grass around them. I couldn't breathe. What felt like waves of electricity coursed through me, and my adrenaline levels spiked. The guide beckoned us forward, slowly. He whispered, "Okay, boys, who's taking the shot?" Josh and Peter had done this before, so they turned to me and said, "All yours, buddy," with wistful smiles. At that same moment, the buck lifted his head. He'd heard or sensed something, and before we knew what was happening, he bolted. Without thinking, I stood up, worked the bolt action, instinctively tracked the path of the deer, and fired. It dropped. We later discovered that I had hit it just behind the left ear. It was a shot of at least 100 yards at a moving target, and the guide was still boasting about it to his mates back at the main building. What no one knew was the total feeling of satisfaction, of utter accomplishment and peace that filled me. I had found my drug. I had found my calling. One thing led to another, and when the hunts no longer gave me the high I needed, I sought out a different type of satisfaction, fell in with the wrong sort of crowd, and the rest is history. I honed my skills, became adept in martial arts, and skilled in the use of knives, swords, and bows, you name it. By the time I reached 30, I had already taken out 10 targets, each purse bigger than the last. It was just what I did. And that brings me to what happened last fall, and why I will never take another contract in my life. My intermediary set up the meeting. It was at a small cafe I knew in Jamaica, New York. It was just about twilight when I arrived and spotted my potential client seated well to the back. He was a fidgety old man, looked about 60, hair all gray and cropped low, with a hat on the table in front of him. He wore a dark coat. It was a bit brisk after all, with winter just starting to spread its fingers. I walked over and stood at the table. "Mr. Alexandra?" I asked. He looked up, eyes darting from me to the other 6 or so customers in the cafe. In front of him was a cup of coffee, barely touched. He motioned for me to sit. I sat, staring at him in silence. As he was about to speak, however, the waitress came over. I ordered coffee myself and some apple pie. As she walked away, Alexandru followed her every step. Not a trusting fellow, I thought. He placed a folder in front of me.
"Mr. Stone,"
he rasped.
"this isn't your ordinary job, and I fear that you may take me, a madman, when I tell you of it. But I beg that you bear with me."
I nodded and opened the folder. There was a photo of a very striking-looking gentleman. Looked to be in his 40s, a touch of gray blended into his sideburns. He had a ruddy look, except for his full pink lips. And then there were the coal-black eyes.
"He is known as Florin Popescu."
I leaned back and stared at the man opposite me, who now seemed as pale as milk.
"He comes from motherland Romania. He has made quite a success for himself in America. But this is no ordinary businessman, Mr. Stone. Popescu is much, much more than that. He is a fiend, hell's own spawn, a vampire."
It was only the genuine fear I saw on Alexandra's face that kept me from falling off my chair in a fit of laughter. Even so, I could not prevent the sides of my mouth from curling upwards. I cleared my throat and realized I made a strained sound when I did it.
"You think me a madman, a fool, a few screws loose, don't you, Mr. Stone?"
I shook my head. "What I think, Mr. Alexandru, is that this is a damn joke, and I will strangle Jacobson for wasting my fucking time." I pushed my chair and I was about to leave when he pulled a small briefcase that he had kept out of view under the table. Looking around to make sure no one was looking in our direction, he popped it open.
$1 million, Mr. Stone. 1 million now, and 1 million when, if, you should complete your assignment.
I paused, looked at the stacks of brand new Benjamins. He might be mad, but his money certainly looks good. I sat back down. "Listen, you better not be jacking around with me." He shoved the case over.
"It's yours."
"And what is it you'd have of me?" I questioned.
"Popescu took my daughter. It's been 3 weeks and I pray that she's dead. Because, Mr. Stone, there are worse things than death."
He pushed over a picture of a stunning young woman, flowing dark hair, olive complexion, and soft brown eyes.
"My Mariana, gone, taken away. What I want, Mr. Stone, is for you to kill that beast once and for all. And if you should find my Mariana, and if she is like him, then put a stake into her heart as well."
Did I just enter the fucking Twilight Zone? I wondered. The only thing keeping me there at that moment was that money. This dude had to be off his rocker. Certainly, he and this Popescu individual had issues, and it seemed his daughter may have found herself a sugar daddy. Whatever happened, this poor old sot seemed to have lost his marbles completely. But hey, if he's paying, it's just another target. Easy money. "Okay, Mr. Alexandra, you have a deal. I'll need some further details, and I expect to have the rest of my money ready upon completion." For the first time, he forced a tiny smile.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. And may God go with you."
I don't think God wants anything to do with the likes of me, I thought. And as I walked away, I felt a hand grip my right arm. I turned to stare directly at Alexandru, who now stood himself.
"There are certain ways to kill Nosferatu, Mr. Stone. Your conventional methods won't work. Learn the ways, for there are many truths hidden inside the legends that Stoker and others have written. Wood and fire."
I tugged my arm free and walked out the cafe. How I wish I had just followed my instinct and told the old fart to go jump off a building. It's 3 weeks later. Taking out a mark is like taking any other test. You need to prepare. So I did my research into Florian Popescu, a recluse but a rich one, which meant getting to him would not be easy. I tried to track his movements, learn his habits, but it was difficult. Popescu hardly left his house, which was heavily guarded, and when he did, it was always in a heavily tinted SUV. He rarely patronized public restaurants and only occasionally appeared at social events, almost all after dark. Silly coincidence, I thought. Nothing I'd seen so far gave any credibility to Alexandra's fantasy that this man was a supernatural creature. Plus, there was no sign of his daughter. I pushed that garbage from my mind. I needed to focus. My opportunity came soon after. Popescu would be attending an open-air cocktail in Philly, starting again just after dusk. The event location was perfect. It stood well away from buildings with lots of trees to help me gauge wind directions and speeds. I chose to set up my nest in an abandoned apartment complex, which gave me easy access to the railway. A clean shot and a quick escape. The shot would have to be from a distance of about 1,200 yards, but with little distraction, I wasn't worried. On the day of the event, I settled into my position early. I chose a 300 Winchester for the job. The target would be a little beyond the 1,000 yards that the Winchester is known for its accuracy, but with a few modifications and my more than exceptional skill, I was confident that this was as easy as it gets. The guests started to arrive. The event was well lit. There were waiters milling around. The who's who came out in their finery. I lay about 4 feet from the window I had chosen. I was watching each guest walk in the entrance through my scope. The venture was almost filled, and I had just started to think maybe my mark wouldn't show up. When there he was. Popescu wore a tall hat. He was decked in a flowing coat and had a fashionable walking stick carved from what might have been dark oak. He sported a neat bow tie and red shirt and was ushered in by 2 bodyguards, one on either side of him. He was one of those individuals you notice when they enter a room, and soon a line of admirers were floating over to him and shaking hands, a kiss here and there, a nod. Slowly, he faced my direction. I checked my indicators. Soon he loomed in my sights. His face filled my scope. This was it. That familiar wave of electricity flowed through me. I controlled my breath. 1, 2, 3. And as I pulled the trigger, I swear he looked right at me. Looked right at me and smiled. And then my slug tore an inch hole right in the middle of his forehead. I saw the gore burst from the exit wound, splattering a woman in a white gown just behind him. And then I packed my gun and ran. Sitting in the dark of the rail car I had jumped into, I replayed the incident over in my mind. Clean shot, right between the eyes. The target had gone down. Job over. So much for Alexandra's boogeyman. Later that night, I messaged Jacobson, informing him of the kill and letting him know that I expected the rest of the payment from our client. And then I went to bed. I could check the news tomorrow. My alarm went off at 6 a.m. As I rolled to turn it off, I saw the message alert light on my phone. I picked it up and saw numerous missed calls from Jacobson. I tossed the phone back on the bed, figuring I'd get to those after I brushed my teeth. I switched on the TV. Commercials were running, so I walked over to the bathroom, leaving the door open so I could hear the TV, and picked up my toothbrush. Soon, the anchor came on, and as expected, the story was all about the shooting. As he started reading the details, I choked and then gagged, almost throwing up. The words he said made no sense to me.
And soon we will be joined live by New York's businessman, Florin Popescu. Mr. Popescu survived an attempt on his life at a social event in Philadelphia last night, but fortunately escaped with minor injuries.
Minor fucking injuries, my ass, I said out loud and hustled over to the TV. The anchor held his left hand up to his ear.
Okay, I'm being told now we have a live link with Mr. Popescu in his home.
And there he was. Florin Popescu filled the split screen to the right of the presenter. He was sitting on a sofa in an ornately decorated parlor.
Mr. Popescu, thank you for joining us.
I barely heard the anchor speak. My heart was beating so hard in my chest I didn't hear the rest of what he asked. But then Popescu started to talk.
It is not a problem,
he said with a thick Eastern accent.
I willingly make myself available to you. I do not belong in hiding. I do not believe in bowing to these cowards, especially ones with such poor aim.
I winced. He continued.
We will give the police all our support because, in the end, we'll find you dead shot.
And he winked into the camera. Dead shot? What the fuck? That was the nickname my college buddies called me. Very few people knew that name. Maybe it was a coincidence, but I doubted it. Right then, in that moment, I believed it all. I believed what Alexandra told me. Whatever Popescu was, he wasn't human. And now he had my scent. So once more, I ran. It's been 2 weeks since that day. Right now, I'm in a small motel in a little town called Letham in Guyana. I've been in South America for a week now. I'm trying to get as far away from New York as possible. But last night I realized that it doesn't matter how far I go. It may not be far enough. Last night I was in the Guyanese capital of Georgetown, and as I was walking back to my hotel from getting supper, something, came after me. My training is the only reason I'm alive right now. My training and the fact that I finally took Alexandra's advice and learned all I could about how to kill vampires. The wooden knife I planted into the creature's chest seemed to work. It screamed and slowly desiccated in front of me. Luminous eyes, fangs, and 2-inch claws, all testament that this was not a human. In life, it would have been a woman. Long, dark hair, features that resembled someone I would rather forget. Alexandra. Yes, so this was the fate that had befallen young Mariana. It was as her father had feared. Well, at least I had completed part of what you asked, Alexandra. I thought to myself. I left Georgetown right at that moment and traveled ever deeper into the depths of Guyana, but they have my location now, and night is coming. My friend, Marcus, has a fascination with love. He's infatuated with the idea of being in love, and will try any means to be in love. Mostly, he tries online dating, sometimes the bar scene. He often invites me and our mutual friend Damon out for drinks while he tries hitting on girls. Mainly, we just have to drive a depressed and broken Marcus back to his apartment after getting rejected by every girl in the bar. On the very rare night, a girl will take the bites to his drunken, rambling pickup attempt. Myself and Damon will go home happy, knowing our buddy has found something, and the next workday, he'll tell us how he wants to marry the girl who went home with him, even when they have nothing in common. My favorite is still, "Guys, I know she hates me, but I think I can change her mind." Me and Damon still joke about it, even months later. But one day, we had our typical lunch hangout at work. We went and got our food and came back to our common lunch spot. Our office had a second break room, which no one goes to. We found it one day and declared it as our lunch spot. So, "What's the news this time, Fabio?" Damon said with a raised eyebrow. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed us pictures of a new girl. "Oh, Jesus Christ, dude. Another girl you're gonna marry." I threw in my 2 cents and I glanced at Marcus's dumb face. He's giddy like a schoolgirl with a crush. "Her name is Sarah, and she's in love with me." Me and Damon exchanged a "really" look as Marcus explained the girl to us. "She's wonderful, hilarious, and adorable as all hell." He goes on and on like this for what felt like an hour. "Uh-huh. And where does she live?" I asked, noting that we've never seen her on any of our Friday night outings. "Well, if you must know, she lives in Chicago," he says, looking out the window longingly. "That's an 8-hour drive from us in Ohio. Quite the distance." "And we talked about meeting her soon," he says, after telling us he only knew her for about 2 weeks. Damon chimes back in. "And how do you plan on doing that?" Marcus, still gazing out towards the urban jungle, answers, "A road trip, of course. And I want my 2 best friends along for the ride." Damon and I looked at each other and just shrugged. "I can take a week-long vacation to help you out, man." I respond to his crazy idea, "And I'll take one off as well," Damon answered, and Marcus's face is aglow. "Great. We leave Saturday morning." It's only Monday, so we have time to take the week off and plan the route. We all take the following week off and spend the next few lunches discussing the driving rotation. Marcus would do the first shift, followed by me, and Damon rounds it out. We would take Marcus's car, which is pretty spacious and can hold the most luggage. With a plan set, we head home Friday to our apartment building and pack for the trip. We even load the car for the trip to save time the next morning. That night, Marcus texts me that he can't sleep because he's too excited to meet Sarah. I tell him to try and sleep. The next morning, my alarm wakes me up, and at 6, I slump out of bed and get ready for the drive. I open my apartment door to see Marcus standing there like a dog ready for a walk. "Are you ready?" he says, while I lock up my apartment. "Ready as I'll ever be," I responded through a yawn. Damon's door opens up and Marcus gives him a similar excited dog greeting. He makes his way down to his car and we follow sluggishly behind him. I sit in the front and Damon sprawls out on the back bench seat. Marcus stops by the gas station to fill up before we hit the road. I stop in and grab us snacks for the day. The next couple hours are filled with songs and calls from our GPS telling us which exit to take every so often. At a point, we pull off to grab a bite to eat. While we wait, I ask Marcus a pretty pressing question. "So, have you ever had a phone conversation with her?" "We did, for like 10 minutes. She liked my voice and I loved hers. It was like honey for the soul," he says, hearts basically hovering over his head. Okay, I say, as Damon comes back from the bathroom. "What'd I miss?" he says, settling next to me. "Just a discussion about Sarah," I responded. We head back on the road, as I man the wheel after lunch. Damon sits in the front and Marcus takes the back bench now. He's wearing his headphones and seems like he's falling asleep. "So, what did happen?" Damon asked me again. I asked if he's ever heard Sarah's voice. She could be a dude, or not who he thinks she is. That could be true, so we'll be there to help him out on the first meeting, Damon says. I agree, and we take our attention back to the radio. Damon goes through Marcus's CD book and finds Through Being Cool by Saves the Day. "Pop it in, man. We have a long drive." We have a sing-along as we get closer to Chicago. And finally, after pit stops and more karaoke, we arrive in Chicago. Now the real quest begins as we try to locate Sarah. "Guys, I just told her I made it to Chicago and asked where she wants to meet," Marcus says with delighted glee. While he waits for a response, we stop at a park to breathe. After taking in the beauty of nature, Marcus gets a response. She says to meet at Starbucks on Eastern Jackson Boulevard, and our hotel is on the way, so we can check in and drop off our belongings before meeting this strange person. We head back to the car and make our way to the date. Damon and I agree to go in after Marcus, as to not look like we're with him. We walk to the Starbucks, with Marcus leading the way. He goes in and spots Sarah instantly. We follow only by 15 seconds. He doesn't order a drink, but we do. After placing our order, Damon sits close by to listen to their conversation. I come over with our drinks, and we fake a conversation to avoid detection. They seem really happy together. Maybe we should introduce ourselves, Damon said, and I respond. Give them a bit to have a good time. We nod and let the two enjoy the other's company. Marcus motions for us to come over, and we do so. We introduce ourselves and say we'll head back to the hotel room after talking for a bit. Sarah seems like a nice girl, and we're happy Marcus found someone after years of looking. Before heading back, we decide to wander around Chicago for a bit before calling it a night. As we assumed that Marcus would spend the night with Sarah, we got a 2-bed suite. But in the worst-case scenario that the meeting would go pear-shaped, the couch is a pullout. But nope, it's midnight, and Marcus still isn't back to the hotel. Me and Damon call it a night and hope he'll text back in the morning. The next day, we get a message from Marcus. It's a picture of the two walking in the street together, and I'm happy for him. Hey man, you want to go walk around and see the sights? Damon asks, just getting into the shower. Nah man, I think I'll just take it easy today, I answer, and fall back asleep. Time passes, and Damon left me a note saying he'll be back later. Marcus texts me saying how happy he is to be with Sarah, and I finally get my lazy self out of bed. Now what to do? I ask myself. Our room has a nice deck area, and I head outside with my phone for the day. I get another message from Marcus, this one a bit more cryptic, just a series of numbers and symbols. I just shrug it off as a pocket text and move on with my day. Our hotel room overlooks Lake Michigan, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Damon comes back towards the end of the day, followed by another weird message from Marcus. This one's a picture message of a dark alley. What the hell is that? Damon asks, as he looks over my shoulder. Just some message from Marcus. I have no idea what it means, I respond, and look at the alley for any clues. By zooming in and turning up the image brightness, I see a door on the side of the alley. No signals as far as I could tell, but this picture was taken from the front of the alley. Did you see this alley today, dude? I asked Damon, who must have walked the whole damn city. He takes my phone and looks close. I did, he says, and we headed out on the hunt. Damon leads me to the alley in the picture, and we make our way to the door. It's not a residential door with no numbers or clear indications of it being so. I knocked first, hoping for a response. Nothing after a full minute. Damon, who is the strongest of us three, pushes on the door for a better judgment. Our path is open, and we head down to the stairs presented to us. My phone's flashlight guides the way to a dark basement. After slowly walking, a red light illuminates the hallway, and I turn off my phone light. The hall ahead has an exposed area with a solid railing. We hide behind and see the origin of the red glow. Marcus is hung upside down, tied up and gagged. Sarah is standing with her back to us and calls for other girls. About 50 girls come out from the shadows and ogle Marcus. Sarah shouts, and the girls leave him alone. She goes to his stomach and pulls out a large knife. It plunges into him, and she runs the knife down towards his face. She splits him in half, and has another girl come and cut him down. With Marcus's dead body on the ground, all the girls take out smaller knives and begin to cut off parts of his body, fingers first, followed by his toes, and the cuts keep coming. I couldn't watch anymore, and I quietly leave with Damon in tow. We ascend the staircase and leave the building before it gets any worse. "What the fuck just happened?" Damon asks between dry heaves. Honestly, I can't answer. All I can do is want to leave Chicago as soon as possible. Damon calls the police and informs them of what we witnessed. The police tell us that they will investigate the cult-like activities surrounding Sarah and her group. Myself and Damon run back to the hotel room to research this occurrence, but before we can begin, Damon sits on his bed, in tears of the loss of his best friend, and I join him. Later, I look up this Sarah character on Facebook and do some digging on her backstory. From my looking, it turns out Sarah is actually the leader of a small group of girls who sell men on the black market. This has been going on under all of our noses, and we've never noticed. According to even more digging, the reason they cut a guy up before selling him is to make more money from a corpse. They have a site on the dark web, which I explore to know more. They work as a unit and pull men from all over the United States. And Marcus was just another man from the pile, a meaningless sack of cash for them to pull from. It's truly sickening to think of how many men they must attract with lures of love. I tell Damon we have to leave Chicago before anything else happens. We pack our stuff and check out early. Damon hurries to Marcus's car and we begin to drive home. The entire ride, we sing from Marcus's CD book to honor his life, as these were his favorites of all time. After the long drive, we arrive back home and decide to stay in my apartment for the night. As we're still on vacation, we can't do much but stay together. Marcus kept a spare key in his car's glove box, and we go into his now ownerless apartment. His life taken away at 28 from a catfish who just wants to harvest his body for money. That Monday, we both sat in silence about the events. If someone asks about Marcus, we say that he left to stay with Sarah, but we know something worse happened to him.